but I knew that I needed to die to everything that I knew in order to become the man I knew I needed to be for my wife and kids. And you see, I had it backwards because I was pursuing this professional success, but my life was a personal mess. Like I was asking myself, what's the point in all this influence and authority if I'm going to be sitting alone around the Christmas tree this year?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the real stories of people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You will learn valuable lessons from their lives, lessons that you can apply to become the best leader you were created to be. When leaders are intentional, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I am an executive coach, business owner, keynote speaker, and obviously host of a podcast. And as we get rolling today, I'd love it if you guys could subscribe, hit like, leave comments, make all the algorithms happy so we can impact more people intentionally in their leadership around the world. Folks, you are in for a treat today. My guest today is Mitchell Osmond, coming to us from Alberta, Canada. Mitchell is a high performance coach. He himself is a podcaster, a top 5% podcaster. He is an entrepreneur. Mitchell, I know that you're also, more than anything, you are just an incredible man of God and a husband. It is a joy to have you on the Intentional Leader podcast today.
Thank you so much, Sean. I just really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to having a powerful conversation with you and your listeners today.
Absolutely. So we love to learn from people in their lives and how leadership ties in with the life lessons we learn. So give us a walk through your career. I know you've had some major hurdles that taught you incredible lessons that brought you to where you are today. So fill us in on who Mitchell is.
That's a big question. I'll try and give you the Coles
I know.
notes, but I think a lot of people hear, people talking on podcasts and think that they have it all together and that they don't understand. But I tell you what, my story comes from one of trauma, of one of learning many, many lessons the hard way. And so a bit about my background. I had been in leadership positions most of my professional life, at least the past 15 years. And I always sought, I would say, success professionally. And I never really considered the personal side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so really people ask me a lot, what was your turning point? What made you turn it around? Like, yeah, I'm a podcaster, I'm a coach, blah, 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 all that stuff. But what was your moment? For me, there were two critical points. One was a fight, and the second one was a funeral. And so
Okay.
if you picture with me, we were sitting on the couch, me and my wife, and we were about 3 years into marriage, and it all hit the fan. We started fighting over money, and that morphed into a fight about me not being present, being checked out, so on and so forth. But at this point, like I said, we've been married for 3 years, but it was a hard 3 years of struggling. This fight, this day was our rock bottom. We fought all the time, but this time was different. For the first time in my life, I felt like, I don't know if I can fix this one. Deep down, I knew that if something didn't change, I was about to lose my wife. And to give you some background, some context, I was recently let go of a senior leadership position. And you see, Sean, for me, my career, and is the case for many men, the
Yeah.
career was everything. It was my calling, it was my identity,
Right.
and I spiraled into depression. I was 60 pounds overweight. We were $100,000 in debt. I was
Wow.
medicating with alcohol and with drugs and just trying to cope. And now I was getting dangerously close to divorce. You see, I was checked out, stressed out, burned
Yep.
out, all the outs, right?
Yeah.
And this was the thing. I had seen success professionally, but I was like, I was plagued with this question. Why can't I figure out my life personally? I could grow organizations, I could lead teams, I could, cast vision all day. But why was it that when I came home, I didn't even know how to talk to my own wife? You see, I felt powerful at work, but powerless
Yeah.
at home, right?
Yeah.
Maybe some of your listeners have been there, and to take it back,
God bless you.
and yeah, another step is I came from a dysfunctional upbringing, right? I had a non-existent relationship with my father. He was an alcoholic, drugs, crime, all that stuff was littered throughout my home
Yeah.
growing up. And I was caught in the middle of it all, man. And so I knew where I came from, and I knew that I wanted something different, but I could feel myself getting pulled back
Hmm.
into the trauma from my past. I could hear my dad's voice in mine,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah.
hated it, right? But I couldn't quite stop it. You see, I knew I was called to more, but I didn't know quite how to get there. At times, it felt like I was two people trapped in the same body, man, and that
Yeah.
was tricky,
I get that.
right?
Yeah.
And so the second point was no joke, man. 7 days later, so I was asked to sing at the funeral of this really wealthy
Mm.
philanthropic man, and there's about a couple thousand people there. And the minister had, after sharing about all of his accomplishments and all the things that he had done, he had asked the congregation, "Are you living a life worthy of imitation?" Right? If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the legacy that you left? And Sean, I'll never forget, man. I was strapping on my guitar, getting ready to sing the last few words,
Hmm.
and I could barely choke at the lyrics
Yeah.
because I all I could think was, man, if this was my funeral, nobody would want to have the marriage that I had. Nobody would want to have the bank account that I have. Nobody was looking at me and saying, "He inspired me to be a better man." They would have
Right.
probably said he struggled, and then it was over, right? And so for me, I realized that, you know what, I've had some stories that were written in my life, because that's what people do. They share stories at funerals.
Mhm.
And that first story was one of my childhood, and that was a sad one. The second one was the story of my marriage, and that had been a struggle. And I
Yeah.
had said, you know what? I'm going to rewrite new chapters every single day, to rewrite my story, to be a man that the man that I'm called to be, not just to lead in business, but to lead at home just as
Yeah.
powerfully, right? And so basically, I mean, and it sounds intense, but I knew that I needed to die to everything that I knew in order to
Hmm.
to become the man I knew I needed to be for my wife and kids. And you see, I had it backwards because I was pursuing this professional success, but my life was a personal mess. Like, I was asking myself, what's the point in all this influence and authority if I'm going to be sitting alone around the Christmas tree this year? You know, and so I made a bold decision, man. I got home from that funeral, and then I just took ownership of everything,
Good.
and
Good.
I surrounded myself with men who were living where I wanted to go. These men,
Hmm.
my ceiling was their floor. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And
Yeah.
they surrounded me, and they held me to that standard that I said I wanted. And Sean, within 18 months, we paid off 100 grand of debt, completely restored our marriage. I lost 60 pounds, completely restored my health, and was clean of distractions and substances and focus. And so after that, because I had been in positions
Yeah.
of leadership, people were like, "Mitch, what is going on? What happened? How did you do all this?" And then I started helping people, just friends in
Cool.
my life, just for free, helping them build budgets, helping them
Yeah.
connect with their wives, right?
Well, before we get into that, I want to dive into some of the stuff you just shared really quick because I think
Yeah.
there's some really good lessons in there. One of the things I heard was you grew up, I'll use the generic phrase, in a dysfunctional home.
Hmm.
There's a lot of dysfunction in a number of ways. And so maybe you weren't even taught what a true life could be and how we could actually excel in life. And, it's fair to say that part of the downward spiral that you're in is because of what you had experienced in your life. But what I love about your story is you didn't use that as an excuse to say, it's not my fault, I'm a victim,
Hmm.
right? At some point, you had to say, no, I own my life. And if I want to have control back of this, in spite of what happened in my past, in spite of my family, I have to choose life for myself. And so I love that idea. So just talk about that for a second of how you didn't fall to a victim mentality. And I know you talked about the funeral and that message that was heard, but there had to be something inside of you that said, I can overcome, obviously
Hmm.
not in your own power, but how did you not fall into the victim mentality?
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. Yeah, you're right. There was this journey of at one point me being a victim, saying that this is all
Mhm.
I'll ever be. Because growing up, I was told two things: you are not the smart one in your family, right?
Mm,
And that you're going to be an alcoholic like your dad. Um,
wow.
and so those were the things that I believed growing up. And so I just thought that that was going to be my lot in life.
Hmm.
So this shift of becoming a victim to taking ownership You know, I heard this phrase a while ago and I just love it. Your past doesn't have to define you, but it can refine you, right?
Hmm.
It can refine you,
Yep.
if you choose to let it. And your past really has whatever meaning you associate to it, right?
Hmm.
You can give it whatever meaning you want. And so for me, I mean, I'd like to say that I did it alone and that I was strong and resilient. No,
Yep.
it was a prompting from, I believe, the Holy Spirit in that
Yeah.
moment in that funeral where the Lord gave me this vivid image of where I was going,
Hmm.
and it was a combination of that and then this visceral feeling of being in this funeral and forced to begin with the end in mind.
Yep.
Napoleon Hill talked about that. Stephen Covey talks about that. Begin with the end
Yep.
in mind. And so, literally, I was focused to be honest with, or I was forced to be honest with myself and say, where am I headed? Do
Hmm.
I like where I'm going? Do I like the end result? And I realized I didn't. And I would like to say that I did it on my own, but at the end of the day, it was the men that I surrounded myself with. And that old
Yeah.
adage, you are the combination of the top 5 people you spend the most time with. Well,
Absolutely.
that was essentially what I did, man, is I reached out to people around me. And honestly, in my social circle, I just asked myself simple questions. Who's got the best marriage that I know? Who's in the best shape that I know? Who has the most money
Hmm.
that I know? And I
Yeah.
reached out and I said, "Hey, would you be willing to, like, I'll buy you a coffee,
Yeah.
a beer, whatever. Would you be willing to just meet with me maybe once a month? Just
Yep.
share with me, how you've seen so much success in this area." And these men celebrated my wins and they stood with me in my losses, man.
That's
They
awesome.
were they were the guys that helped me when I fell back into that victim
Hmm.
mindset and I started to self sabotage and that imposter syndrome came out.
Yep.
They were the ones who called me up to a higher standard. And it was because they were living where I wanted to go. So not only did they have the steps that I needed to get there, but their life was physical evidence that that could be true for me as well. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%. No, I love that. And there's really two major aspects you're talking about there. The first aspect is the power of God in this, right?
Hmm.
And you read scripture, and scripture is story after story after story after story of failed human actions, not failed humans, failed human actions, and God's pursuit of them to restore them. And He never gives up. He's always pursuing. For you, it happened to be finally in that funeral where it rang true to you, but we know he was dropping bugs the entire time. The funeral was just the final one that actually stuck for you to make that transition in life. And so we always have to realize that inner feeling, that conscience that's inside of us, that's God guiding that conscience. And when that conscience is saying, you can do better, you can take a step, you can overcome this, this is not who you are, that's huge. But then the other side of it is we can't do it alone. We need other people, and we need people that have been through that and have overcome that. And this is where I really strive with people, Mitchell. And I'm curious to hear in your work today with men. So often we want to share all the good things that are happening. It's like you talked about those 5 guys. This one's in the health, this is in the wealth, this is this. They have good things to share, but when we share with honesty and integrity and vulnerability, the fact that we have failed too, that has greater impact sometimes than the success that we've been through.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I often say this, the common phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I say it takes a village to raise a father. We need to
Yeah.
surround men in these moments where, whether it is they're, newly married or newly in their fatherhood, or I don't care if it's newly. I mean, they could be 50, 60 years old. We just need community. We need accountability. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Because what happens, man, is, and I think the reason why we fall into this trap specifically as men is because we have this lone wolf mentality, right?
Hmm.
And there's a sense of nobility in that almost. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm a self-made man, and when I bring my head up, you all will see, what I've done. And the reality is the lone wolf dies alone. Strong wolves
Hmm.
build packs, and we need to understand that there is no such thing as self-made. There is power
Yep.
in community, not just because it can help you succeed in life, but because what happens is when you get around a community of people who you can be honest with and share things with, you're taking those struggles out of the darkness into the light. And the moment you bring it into the light, it loses its power. Now, I'm
Hmm.
talking about both relationally, but also spiritually,
Sure.
in both ways. It's like, man, the enemy can't get a foothold on something that you're talking about as, you got out in the open that you're given to the Lord. But then also,
Hmm.
in relationships, like if you struggle with this conflict with your wife, or you struggle with addiction, or you struggle with whatever that thing is for you, the moment you talk to another man about it, then all of a sudden, and when they say, yeah, man, I struggled with that for a long time, here's what I did, you're like,
Yep.
what? All of a sudden it takes the weight off. It's like the weight of the world is off your shoulders, man. And you're like, oh,
Hmm.
you wrestle with that too? Oh, wow. But see, the thing is we have a hard time doing that, especially as men. And I'm talking a lot to men because that's primarily who I coach, right? So,
Sure.
but the same concepts apply to women as well. But in that sense, this is why it's so valuable. It will make you a stronger leader when you
Hmm.
when you learn how to practice that vulnerability, that humility, that honesty. It'll make you a better leader in the workplace. It'll make you a better father. It'll make you a more emotionally available husband. There is absolutely no loss that can be taken from practicing some of
Absolutely.
these things.
Yeah. And it's just, it's hard for people to go there. And my assumption, but I think there's probably some evidence behind this, is people, especially men, are afraid to go there because they're afraid of judgment, right?
Mhm.
If I'm real with people, they may run away from my relationship with them. They may not be a friend anymore. They might think that I'm less than. My response to that is, if that's the case, they weren't really the friends to begin with. And
Mhm.
they weren't taking an honest look at themselves. Because when we
Mhm.
take an honest look at ourselves, we realize our humanity, our frailty, and our need for other people, and we share that, it's going to draw like minded people. And
Mhm.
so I would encourage others around, don't be afraid of the judgment. There may be some that judge and walk away, but there's going to be others that are endeared and come alongside. That's your pack. That's the ones
Mhm.
to run with.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage you with this. I mean, I actually developed an entire framework around this called the Iron Five. All the men in my community have their own Iron Five, which is the five men that surround them.
Mhm.
And that's the reason why we do that is because of this is like we don't reach out and be honest with people, or we don't reach out for support because we think that we're going to be perceived as weak, or
Mhm.
because that's a big thing, or unsuccessful, or whatever the case might be. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, I've asked my clients this often. It's like, when was the last time somebody asked you for help or support? And they tell me, and then I said, how did that feel? Did you feel like they were a burden to you, or were you actually kind of humbled that they asked? And they're like, oh yeah, I thought it
Absolutely.
was great. And so I said, did you go out of your way even to make time to be able to spend with this person? He said, well, yeah, because it felt good. I wanted to help them. I said, so what makes you think you would be any different than that person that reached out to you to someone else that's ahead of you? Because here's the reality: is anyone who's gone before you understands how hard it is to get to where you're going. They will not criticize you because they get it. Anyone behind you, or the critics or the naysayers, yeah, they might, but you know what? Because they don't understand, but it doesn't matter because they're not going to be where you end up anyways. And
Right.
so let's lay the ego aside, let's lay the pride aside, and reach out to some of these men who can, or women who can surround you and support you, because there's a high likelihood that you're
Mhm.
actually going to be adding to their life and adding to fill in their bucket by giving them an opportunity to pour into you. But we
Absolutely.
self-sabotage, right? So we don't do it.
Absolutely.
So I even go as far as to say, don't rob that other person who's ahead of you. Don't rob them of the blessing to be able to speak in your life by not asking them.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to quickly interrupt this podcast to talk to you about something huge that is coming out in August from Ren and Jazz Professional Coaching. It is the Intentional Leader Network. We've talked about this coming. The Intentional Leader Network, you are going to get an online course on how to become the best leader you were created to be. You're going to have bi-weekly group coaching calls with everybody in the network where you'll be learning content, you'll be given tools, and we'll even have hot seat coaching where you will have the chance to bring your questions to the table have me coach you in real time with the entire audience listening. And one of the greatest aspects of the Intentional Leader Network is developing a community of friends from all different sectors, all different levels of leadership, learning from one another and taking that learning to the next level. If you're ready to become the best leader you were created to be, look for the Intentional Leader Network at intentionalleadernetwork.com. Join the wait list today. It launches in August. We're looking forward to having you in the network. Thanks. I love that. I love that. So on your website, I know it's Dad Nation. You're trying to create this culture and this community of men to become both godly in their homes and at work and everything. And the tagline on your website is reclaim your home, health, and happiness. Talk about that word reclaim for a minute and why you chose that.
That's great. No one's ever actually asked me that.
Yeah.
I would say for a couple different reasons. I'm not saying claim it because I think that we already have it, but we're in a society today where we're confused more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Men, especially younger men, are so confused about
Yeah.
what their role is as a man, as a husband, as a father. We're so you can't even say the word masculinity without getting canceled, right? And
Right.
so there is fear and anxiety, and men don't know where they fit. And so
Mm-hmm.
the need hasn't gone away for a
Yeah.
strong, courageous, and compassionate man in the home, but
Mm-hmm.
we just have to reclaim it because we're not aware of how important it is. And so the reason why I chose that is because when you step into that, I mean, when I say this in the beginning of every single podcast, when the dad gets better, the whole family wins.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like
Yep.
another version of the rising tide lifts all ships. But there
Yep.
is significance that you carry in the home, and when you are healthy, right, you impact the health of your entire family. When you're happy, or when you have your mindset dialed in, and your spiritual life dialed in, you impact the spiritual climate of your home, and overall in your relationships, because you carry the emotional I would say you carry the emotional climate in your home. Like,
Yep.
and I tell people this all the time. You are the thermostat, not the thermometer. You don't come
Correct.
in and react to the room. Your role as a father, as a husband, as a man in the home is to set the tone, set the temperature, right? Because you get the opportunity when you come home, when it's stressful, when it's chaotic, the wife's had the kids all day and it's crazy. You walk in, your presence ought to be a soothing balm to your family, not something that's an agitator, right? And so the reason why I say reclaim your home and health and happiness is because so many men don't even necessarily understand that this is the role that they carry. And
Mm-hmm.
so when they can step in and say, no, 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 I'm going to take this back. I'm going to take the pen back and rewrite the story. I'm going to take back leadership of the family because I'm tired of seeing my wife have to be both mom and dad, or both masculine and feminine, or both leader and so when we can reclaim that, man, powerful stuff happens, not just
It
personally,
is.
but how it affects your professional life as well is significant.
Absolutely. And so let's dive into this just for 1 second. I love the way you explained everything there. One of the big issues that we run into as far as resistance to what you're describing could be that aspect of the masculinity, right? An extreme masculinity. And so even just your phrasing there of taking back your home and leading your home and things. But I think people miss the opposite side of that, right? Is they think that that means that we would be possibly holding back, holding down, or oppressing the
Hmm.
wife, the
Hmm.
woman of the house. It's exactly the opposite,
Hmm.
right? And so I want people to understand that even like from a scriptural level, this is how God created all these things to be. And he talks numerous times in the Bible, but then in Ephesians 5 about when we, as the man, lead our family well and lead them the way that we're supposed to in health. And I take that both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Our love for our wife elevates her
100%.
in a big, big way. And I think that that's the part people miss is that being the man of the house, the way that God described, elevates the wife. It doesn't hold her back.
Hmm. Hmm. I would agree 100%. And the problem is, though, is we haven't always done that, and
Right.
we've swung so far on that pendulum
Mhm.
of being oppressive and dominant and domineering,
Yep.
We've actually not done a great job at elevating our brides. We have not done
Hmm.
a great job at elevating our children. And so
Yep.
what's happened is it has felt like a dictatorship, where it's like I would literally, there was a guy who commented on my post on Instagram earlier today and had this
Yeah.
mentality,
Yeah.
right? It was like, well, it's her job to serve, and I'm the leader of the righteousness, and I'm blah 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 blah. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, how is that? And I just said, hey man, just gentle pushback here. How's that working for you? Does
Yeah.
your wife enjoy that? Highly unlikely. And so, even the word submission, we get a little
Hmm.
bit twisted around that word. I mean, think about submission, mission
Right.
alongside, like we're running together in this journey, right? And so it is. I mean, Paul also says it's your job to lay down your life like Christ laid down
Mhm.
his life, for the bride. And so, am I willing to die for my wife? That kind of love. I mean, that's significant. And so, I
Yep.
think what happens is we kind of we take things out of context, or maybe we've had a bad experience with what I would say a toxic masculine man,
Hmm.
and then we blanket statement everything. But when I'm talking about
Yep.
masculinity, I'm talking about healthy,
Yep.
like strong, compassionate, courageous masculinity, where a man will lay down his life for his family, where he elevates his wife, where he serves his family
Hmm.
first. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, I'm right on target with you. And I think when people understand that full context, they understand the joy that is the result of it. And so, with all these things, we've always used the phrase in our executive coaching and the leadership that we do that the best leaders are the same at work, at home, and at play. And that's what you're
Hmm.
describing right now, right? So it's not we're this way at work and then at home it's something totally different. So, for our listeners, for the men, this may apply directly to you. For the ladies that are listening today, maybe it's the man in your life that needs to hear about this. You've created Dad Nation. You got your coaching through that. Describe a little bit about the work that you're doing with men, even like to what that looks like in a group coaching session.
Hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I appreciate the opportunity to
Yeah.
share. Yeah, so I help high performing men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness. And so those three pillars can be broken down to home, which is really elevating your key relationships in your life, your relationship with your wife and your relationship with your children, right? The second
Hmm.
piece, your health. We talk a lot about nutrition, about exercise, the importance of physical activity, and how that affects you in every way. It's
Hmm.
not just physical. Exercise is far more about your mental health and your
Yep.
relational health than it is physical. And then the happiness piece is really just about mindset and helping men understand some of the things we talked about the self sabotage or the self limiting beliefs that come up, the narratives that we believe from our
Yep.
childhood. Because realistically, we
Yep.
know like 80% of the way we see ourselves and the way we see the world is formed before we're 12 years old. So we have to look
Absolutely.
back into the past. And so we do a lot of that deep work, right? How to,
Yep.
and then fix that stuff in order to elevate you, not just personally, but professionally. And so, yeah, I offer a cohort coaching package, which is called the Dad Nation Coalition. And it's for men who want to level up in those three areas. And
Awesome.
those are the three things we focus on. We also focus a lot on leadership, but yeah, man, that's why we do it, because I believe now more than ever, we need strong, courageous, and compassionate men,
Hmm.
not just in the workplace, but at home. We need them to show up as powerfully at home as well.
Yeah. I agree. You've talked a lot about the self sabotage and the limiting beliefs or the lies that we believe. That is so prevalent. And that's for everybody. That's for men, women, even kids, right?
Hmm.
And we've heard so many different stories around that. And I think we need to realize sometimes that this is not just about humanity. This is about what's going on even beyond humanity in the spiritual realm, right? Where
Hmm.
the number one name for Satan is deceiver.
Hmm.
He lives in deception. So if he can make you believe something that is not true about you or about somebody else, he wins. And
Hmm.
that's why we need other people to give us clarity, to help us drive through that and really become who God created us to be, which is to be a leader. Men or women, we are called to lead. Leadership is influence,
Hmm.
but we have to influence from a place of holistic health. So I love that. So you talked about the Iron Five. Go a tick deeper into that, and like, how does like maybe out of your group coaching cohorts, do they find some of their Iron Five out of that cohort? How's that play?
Yeah, so basically, the framework broken down is really there's five different roles that these, and they sometimes can overlap, as
Mhm.
like a Venn diagram sort of overlaps. But the one I'm a big fan of alliteration. The
Mhm.
first one is the partner. Okay, this is the guy that walks beside you. He's the guy who's with you in the war. He knows your wins, he knows your wounds. You don't have to wear a mask with him, right? This is kind of like the biblical story of Jonathan and David, that kind of
Yep.
relationship. Number two is the protector. This is
Mm.
the guy who watches your blind spots. He sees what you miss. He calls out your patterns, the stuff that will take you out if it's left unchecked, right? He's not impressed by you, but he's invested
Mhm.
in you, right? The third guy is the provider. This is the guy who invests in your growth. This is the coach, the mentor, the spiritual father, whatever. Someone who's been where you want to go, right?
Yep.
Who's willing to open the doors and shorten that learning curve, collapse the time. The
Mhm.
fourth one is the pusher. This is the guy who's the most uncomfortable relationship, but he demands your best. He's the guy who won't let you coast. And he's
Mhm.
constantly pulling you out of your comfort zone and reminding you of who you said you would be. Right. And then the fifth one is the pioneer, which this is the guy that shows you what's possible. He expands your vision of what's possible because of the life that he's living. His wins remind you that your current ceiling is someone
Mhm.
else's starting floor, right?
Yep.
Um, and so that's, in summary, that's the four: the partner, the protector, the provider, the pusher, and the pioneer. And I'm telling you, man, you get, and it doesn't have to be like, some of those could be overlaps. Like I said, there could be
Sure.
three, but you get those men in your life, you will be unstoppable in business and in marriage and you
Mhm.
name it, man.
That's awesome. And then you also need to reciprocate and be that for others.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you're
Keep
being
pushing it
poured
on.
into, because you are one of someone else's iron five,
Hmm.
and that's the thing you need to be thinking about as well.
Yeah.
So,
So, last question for you. Culturally speaking, today, and especially with things that have happened in the last couple of months and such, and I don't want to get into political realms, but just cultural realms, there is an awakening to men being the men they were called to be.
mhm.
What are you seeing culturally? How are you maybe not taking advantage of it, but jumping on that wave where men are beginning to think again of like, okay, I actually need to lead. I need to do something different. I'm not going to be suppressed anymore. What are you doing to rally? What are you seeing around? I'm just trying to think about like the movement aspect of it because it's starting. It's been starting for a little bit. It seems to be ramping up speed. What's your thoughts on that? How do we navigate that?
Yeah, that's so good. I think it's come from, like you said, especially current events. But at the end of the day, I think everyone realizes, maybe this way isn't working anymore.
Mm,
Maybe it's not advantageous to shove man into a corner, or in a dark hole. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
so here's some statistics, though, man. I'll share with you real quick.
yeah.
1 in 4 kids today in the U.S. will grow up without a father in the home. Right now, of these kids, 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes. 85% of children with behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. And this last one, which is crazy, 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. The
Wow.
reality is, our kids need us, our spouses need us. This world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men to step up. And you're right. Now more than ever, we're seeing a hunger for that in
Hmm.
our society, because it's not, the way we've been doing things is not working. And so
Yeah.
what's happened is we've raised these millennials and even the Gen Zs coming up
Hmm.
from them, because I'm a millennial, but the Gen Zs coming up are more confused than ever, and they're getting into relationships where the wife or the girlfriend is like, I feel like I got to be both. I got to be the guy and the
Right.
girl. I got to be the
Right.
wife and the husband. And she has to end up stepping into that role, operating in a function that she's not even happy with. And so what happens is she begins to disrespect the husband or the man,
Hmm.
or she begins to feel like he's incompetent, and
Right.
and then he feels disrespected and incompetent, so he is not as great at loving her, and then not
Hmm.
as great at really just like investing in her because he feels this way. And so this is what happens when the polarity gets thrown off. The polarity gets reversed,
Yep.
and the woman becomes both the man and the woman in the relationship, or the husband and the father. And so that's why now more than ever, we're confused and we need to do something about it. And to answer your question, that's exactly why I started this whole movement in the first place 2 years ago, because I saw this hunger coming and I could sense it because I was helping people in my life. Women would come to me and be like, where are all the men at? Legit, my wife's girlfriends who were single would constantly ask, where are all the men? I don't get it. I'm surrounded by boys. And so then that's what led to that conversation. But I couldn't agree more with you, Sean. We're needing this more than ever, and not in this alpha domineering way. I'm talking about good, strong, courageous men who love their families, who are committed beyond a shadow of a doubt to their faith, to their success, to their family, you name it, right? So that's why I'm here, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I like what you described there, and it's this vicious cycle, right? Because you described where he is, but you also described where she is as a result of it. And it creates this vicious cycle where everybody feels, the men feel disrespected, the women feel unloved. And that's where it's time for men to step in and say, honey, let's stop for a second. Let's look at this. Let's reclaim our marriage. Let's get a fresh start, and let's do something together in this. And it's not domineering it. It's just saying, let's lead the way and bringing it back to where it needs to be. Because if you don't take a dramatic stand, vicious cycles never stop.
Absolutely.
So that's fantastic. I love your mission. I love your mission wholeheartedly and what you're trying to do there. And it's been awesome to have you on here. I feel like we could go all day talking about this, but we can't. But I want to finish with this question. We finish every episode with this question, Mitchell. And it's a simple, quick tip question. Mitchell, what is something our listeners can intentionally do today to be a more effective leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say own your time, right? Be very intentional about your time. This phrase, time is the only currency we spend without knowing the remaining balance. We have no idea how much time we have left. I could have 60 minutes left. I could have 60 years. I have no idea. But we also know that by the time your children are 12 years old, 75% of your time with them is gone. By the time they're 18, 90% of your time with them is gone. So get your head out of your phone. Get your head out of the work, come home, show up powerfully, and be present, because you have no idea how much time you have left. And please do not live your life. I don't want you to get you at the end of your life, because there's 100% chance that you're going to take a last breath. And when you do, I don't want you to have regret. All right. So be fully focused, be fully present, and lead as powerfully at home as you do at work. That would be my encouragement.
Fantastic encouragement. I appreciate that. Well, listeners, check out the show notes where you can find out how to connect with Mitchell and with Dad Nation and get involved with those cohorts. Mitchell, I appreciate your heart for Christ, your heart for family, and for helping men become what God created them to be. So thanks for being on the Intentional Leader podcast.
Thank you, Sean. It was an honor and a pleasure to be with you today.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.